welcome to Young Money. I'm Nozi Pombanjwa. Today we're coming to you from AU Gold Distillery in Centurion. We're about to meet two young men who are the co-founders of the distillery. The names are Dumo, Ndlovu, as well as Lungelo, Fatyela, and they're going to be talking to us about the reasoning around going the full Monty, going the manufacturing route. We're not talking about entrepreneurs who are importing finished products and sticking on branding and packaging. They're manufacturing local vodka that has been positioned in the market as a premium brand, and in the process also telling authentic African stories and showcasing the city of Johannesburg as a product that is good to export. You're going to love meeting them. Let's go. Start off with just understanding how this now brilliant idea, which I'm sure many people thought was a crazy idea, first came about. Dumo?
Well, firstly, he and I, we've been discussing ideas for many years, I think since we were in high school. So we went through a number of ideas throughout the years, and eventually, you know, we came across the idea of developing our own brand of alcohol. And at first, what we did is we brainstormed a couple of ideas in terms of branding, in terms of inspiration, what inspires us and what do we see. So if you look at Johannesburg as a city, it's the birthplace of many, you know, cultural aspects, whether it's music, whether it's dance. So for us, this is another creation that comes from the city. This is just like Ipansula or Kwaito or whatever it is, just another creation from people that are born and bred in the city of Johannesburg. Johannesburg's given us so much, so we give back in turn, and we create products such as AU Gold Vodka. You know, so
was it an easy decision to come to vodka? I mean, are you guys both vodka fans, or did we have a brandy versus whiskey versus vodka debate and conversation? I mean, talk to me about how that idea actually gelled, that this is the thing that we're going to use as an extension of the city.
You know, funny thing about this is that oftentimes when people ask us, how did you guys actually start with this? They expect some alcohol fuel story. Yeah. And the opposite of that, actually. It was a very sober-minded decision, and an instance of what inspired us, or rather led us to actually consider this as a business, was the growth that was being experienced in the craft beer market. So we looked at that, we saw that, and we came to the realization that it would not make sense for us to enter that market at that point in time, because it was already very competitive. So it was a case of how do we now position ourselves as something similar to that, but not compete in that same pool.
How did you guys get started though? What was the first steps that you've had to take? I mean, today we're at an industrial site where you are manufacturing the product and the branding looks absolutely phenomenal. But day one, what did that look like?
I think
research.
Research?
Yeah.
Tons of it. I think it took us approximately 8 months. And this was happening while we were also acquiring the skill of actually producing. And I think the longest thing thereafter was licensing, fulfilling that aspect. It took us quite some time as well. After that, it was a case of, as you said, the branding itself. I think we went through 3 different variations of what is now today this. And that took us quite some time. We were about 90% happy. We had a couple of tastings and we got consumer feedback. And I think that's the benefit of being a small guy. You are able to somewhat learn quickly and apply those learnings very early. So that's the benefit.
So those are the first steps, Dumo, starting off from research, getting to the brand before you get to the manufacturing. But perhaps I also just want to take a couple of steps back. You know, you talk about being very clear about not wanting to enter the craft beer market and instead wanting to go into the manufacturing of local vodka. Talk to me about the funding experience. I mean, you always need finances and financiers to buy into the idea. How did that happen?
I think at first, as I said before, he and I developed the idea for AU Gold Vodka, and at first we looked at public institutions for funding, and it's a rather strenuous process and it takes a lot of time for you to eventually get your funding. So what we did is we prepared a case for this product. And then using that case, we tried to solicit funding from different private individuals, and eventually as someone who believed enough in what we had created and believed enough in us, to put money towards, creating what you see today.
So you had an individual funder, and had you approached traditional banks and other institutions prior to that?
In terms of banks, no. Yeah, but I think we knew ourselves that we stood a better chance with approaching various high net worth individuals that could put money behind, because I think banks are very rigid in their approach, especially funding young guys like ourselves. So we had to
young guys wanting to go into alcohol.
Exactly, exactly. So we had to look for someone who, has an appetite, for entrepreneurs and for funding, yeah. So I think that's why we never approached any banks. We just approached various private individuals. Some, budged, and yeah, that's the story of how we got.
And the journey of finding the right high net worth individual, was that in itself something that you would say was fairly easy, or did you have to go and have quite a number of one-on-one engagements before you got the big fish that bit the bait?
It's a case of, even prior to actually sitting down with them, just getting in contact with them, that took some doing. And once you actually sat down with them, it had to be a case of that everybody would be happy with whatever agreement is reached. So we went and met quite a number of them, and the one that actually ended up buying into our dream and vision, was not the biggest of the fish,
Right.
So I guess it all worked out in the end.
It's kind of like Colonel Sanders, getting turned down by 99 banks or whatever it was, and then the 100th one says, hey, I like your idea, I'll endorse it, here's some money.
So I want to take maybe 2 steps back now, because before the entrepreneurial route, I think to a large extent as young people, we're generally expected to toe some sort of academic followed by corporate route by family and those around us. How did you guys break away from that expectation, and how was it received?
Well, I don't know if you want to go first.
I'll go first.
All right.
So in terms of that, I have an issue. I'm not very academically inclined. I like learning, but I don't quite like being taught. So from a very early age, I knew that I just could not wait to get past grade 12. I knew that was it for me. And when I was in late grade 11, I told my dad that I want to go into business. So he's like, okay, fine, what business are you going to go into? At that time, I had no clue what business I wanted to go into. I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. And he laughed it off, thinking that, look, it's fine. By the time he's done with matric, he would have sobered up. And that did not happen, needless to say. However, I did go to varsity, I think, that very same year, simply because of the expectations. I did not get through past the year. And I tried again the following year. And after that,
courses.
I did something else. And after that, I just figured, no, look, this is not gonna work. And I think me just kicking the can down the line is not helping anyone. So I took the plunge and started trying out entrepreneurial ventures, primarily some in the tech space and others just trying to sell things. And I'm a very big believer of the 10,000 hours, so I just could not wait to get started and start earning my hours. And yeah, I'm happy, I think, things are looking up from here.
Things are looking up. Difficult conversations initially, but eventually things are looking up. What was your experience, Dumo?
In my case, I was pretty mean in the kitchen, so I wanted to be a chef when I graduated from high school. So I went to UJ, and it was all wow for about 2 years, and I really think I lost interest after that. And I've always had, just like him, dreams of being an entrepreneur. So immediately after I left university, I approached him with an idea that I had, because I come from background of cooking and etc. So I approached him with an idea to start off a franchise, a food franchise. Unfortunately, that didn't take off, and various other ideas didn't take off. And up until I think 2014, 2013, he and I, had separated for a while. and we came back to each other based on the alcohol, and that's where, you know, this really started taking pace, and it really started formulating to what we have today based on that. So I think both he and I have always had dreams of being entrepreneurs.
And so if you guys could undo one thing of the journey, I mean, it sounds like it hasn't been a smooth sailing, linear projection. There's been convergence, divergence in terms of the partnership. There have been businesses that have been started, businesses that have failed. What would you do differently? And I suspect that might be different for the both of you. Dumo, you go first.
I mean, first and foremost, I'd say that going through everything that we went through, I wouldn't take away any of it because I've learned so much from it. However, if I knew what I knew then, there were certain mistakes, obviously, that I wouldn't make, you know.
What's the biggest mistake that you think you've made, or the most costly mistake you've made so far?
I think, for example, going into what we're doing now, for example, you spend money on certain things that you don't need to spend money on. And we've done that on countless occasions. So when you look at it, when you're a small business, you need to really utilize, you know, any form of finance that you have in a very, you know, stringent manner. And what we did is we had these grand ideas, and we used to spend money on trying to be very luxurious, very grand, and we wasted a lot of money in terms of doing so. So if I was to re-look it, or you know, come at it from a position where I have the knowledge that I have now, I would spend money on making money first, and then, you know, approaching it from a, you know, a grand scale. So that's what I would change in terms of how, you know, we've done things.
So, Lungelo, we'll come back to your views on what you would change, but certainly what we are hearing as we go to break is that even if you're putting to market a luxurious brand, you still need to be very careful about the lifestyle that you live off the business and how also you're spending on the business. A luxurious brand doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be luxurious spending behind the business. Small businesses are lean, and they run on as little oil and money as possible. That's the first kernel of wisdom that we're getting from the duo behind AU Gold. We're taking a short break. When we come back, we hear what Lungelo's views are in terms of what he would change, but also get to understand a little bit more of the positioning of AU Gold in the market. Welcome back to Young Money. We are at AU Gold Distillery in Centurion. We're sitting down with the co-founders, Dumo, Ndlovu, as well as Lungelo, Fatyela. And when we went to break, we were getting a little bit of hindsight from Dumo in terms of what he would do differently. He says spend less on things that aren't as important on the business. Lungelo, what would you do differently at this stage?
Well, in terms of the business, I think this is an idea that we perhaps should have arrived at way earlier. I think that's one thing that if we could control, we should have done differently. And other than that, I think I have to agree with Dumo that we did not necessarily spend every rand we had at our disposal, you know, and stretched it. I think some rands we just literally gave away. So I think with experience, that's one thing that perhaps we could work on.
Right, so there's quite a bit of consistency in terms of how the journey could have been rejigged, but let's talk about where we are now. AU Gold is available at retailers in South Africa. Talk to me about the positioning in the market, your pricing model, how you reach that pricing model, and how do consumers get a hold of it?
Okay, so in terms of that, AU Gold Vodka is simply because we're an artisanal distillery, and quite a lot goes into making it. So basically, in the production of AU Gold Vodka, we handle everything from start to finish ourselves, from grain selection to actual bottling and packaging. Right? So, and everything we get is quite expensive, for lack of a better word. So in terms of that, initially when we were starting, we were considerably smaller than what we are today. So that informed our pricing initially. So that was our entry strategy in terms of pricing. However, I think in the past, we've been at market for the past 4 months. And since then, we have done quite a number of good business. And because of that, we were able now to pass the benefits off to the end consumer. So we've dropped our pricing considerably so. So currently, we are a premium brand, fantastic drink itself. And I think most people, when they ask what is our positioning, I think it's both that, premium and artisanal.
So I'm going to get to the nuts and bolts because I know that there are viewers who are avid vodka drinkers and lovers, and they want to know what is it going to cost me to pick up a bottle of AU Gold Vodka. What is the exact pricing and where does that pitch you in terms of other brands?
Well, our pricing is $270 at retail level. Right? So if you go to a Macro or a Spa, you'll find at that price range. And that puts us just above your Kettle One, your Absolutes, and the most popular one, Sky. And just below your Grey Goose Belvederes. So I think that's the perfect position for us.
The perfect position, and of course we spent a little bit of time, Dumo, right at the beginning. You're speaking about the brand and how this is an extension of the city. Let's just go back into that, and maybe you could pick up the bottle and just talk us through what we are seeing in terms of the design, because this, of course, is a very big part of what you're actually bringing to market. As a South African, why should I, be proud of having purchased an AU Gold Vodka versus, for example, a Sky Vodka that I know is probably good competition?
I think in our day and age, it's about time we, take pride in our cities. A lot of the time we are very proud of going to New York, very proud of going to Moscow, very proud of going to London. And if you look at what the Russians do with their capital cities, not capital cities, but their cities in general, they're very proud of them. They export them, you know what I mean? London does the same thing, New York does the same thing. So we believe that AU Gold Vodka, which celebrates the city of Johannesburg. Johannesburg is a very unique city on its own, and we need to celebrate it. We need to export this product and tell our stories across the world. So hence why, even if you look at this casing here, it has the various elements that, are reminiscent of the city. So if you look at it, it has a brief history on the city as well, which we believe is very important because, if nobody's going to tell our stories, who is going to tell our stories? So we need to tell our stories through products such as AU Gold Vodka. We need to be, whatever we create needs to be an extension of who we are. So the inspiration behind AU Gold Vodka is a means and a way to tell African stories about African cities, and a lot of our products that we create have that same inspiration. So AU Gold Vodka is our first product, of which we will release other products such as gins, liqueurs, but the sentiments remain the same because we want to tell stories about, where we're from. We want people in Europe, the Americas, Asia, wherever it is, when they pick up a product, they should know, they should get a piece of an extension of,
So the product range is going to extend in terms of the different products that you're going to come through. Are the cities that you're going to be encasing and exporting also going to change, or are we looking at something that is going to be firmly rooted in this idea of Johannesburg being the main product?
It's not always going to be centered around cities.
Okay.
I think as Africans we have different stories to tell. Actually, numerous, thousands of stories to tell. So those stories those brands will be based on various African stories. Our first brand celebrates one aspect of many aspects. So the next one might be about, perhaps certain a closer warrior or whatever it is, or whichever story we might conjure up ourselves just to, extend and express to the world. So it's mainly based on it's got a very African influence.
Right.
Most of our products will have
But
that.
you guys have obviously taken the hard route. Would have been much easier to just be a packaging business, for example, where you import the vodka, you import the casing or the bottles, and then slap on some sort of branding, and then position that as something that is authentically South African or authentically African. I want to understand the experience of actually being manufacturers. What is the real challenge that lies behind it? What's the kind of problems that you're dealing with on a daily basis because you're running a turnkey operation and not just slapping on packaging and branding?
In terms of why we actually decided to actually be manufacturers and not import is simply because we want to somewhat inspire South Africans to go into manufacturing as well. And also it's a case of a pride aspect, I guess, that we want to create something and present it to the world and say, we as South Africans, as Africans, we too can create things. I think that's the aspect that we are sentimental about mostly. And in terms of the challenges we face as manufacturers, there are quite a lot actually. Yeah. And I think Dumo kindly walk us through that.
I mean, as you said, it'll be much easier for us to source bulk spirits. But going through the whole process yourself, I think for me there's a certain pride element to it, as you said, because there's a certain signature behind it. For example, when you make a liqueur, that means you have to sit down and you know, be creative and take various products, various organic products, and put them together and amalgamate that and create a product that is palatable and a product that you think would sell. That's a very difficult skill. Yeah. You can't get someone to make you the next Amarula or to make you the next Strawberry Lips, whatever it is, if we're talking about liqueurs. But you sitting down and trying out various flavors and putting those flavors together and creating a product that will be enjoyed by, you know, your end consumers, that's very difficult. And we take a lot of pride in creating, you know, that. And if you look at other products, for example, if you go into making products such as whiskey, you know, it's also a very creatively intensive process where you have to gauge as to, you know, which grains you use and which combination of grains you use if you're gonna make like a blended whiskey or whatever it is. So there's a lot of pride we take from that, and I think, as you said, the whole process of going through it yourself, for us is very important because it inspires, it could potentially inspire other people to, you know, instead of sourcing from China, instead of sourcing from various other markets across the world, let us make it here and let us try to export our products, let us try to create, you know, and stop exporting. So I think it's a very good thing where we're trying to wrestle some of the industry back into our hands and try to create ourselves. So we try to extend that to everyone we work with. So in terms of that, again, I think it's easier for us because we try to utilize other small businesses to support us because we're a small business as well. So us doing it ourselves also extends to other businesses making a form of living through us.
So, I mean, there are lots of young entrepreneurs who are watching this show, either that are already in business or have aspirations of being in business. If you could share any insights with them that could potentially make their journey even just as slightly easier than the journey that you have been on, what would be some of those pieces of advice that you would share?
Well, I would personally say that get started. The first thing is, I think a lot of young guys have big dreams. They want to do many things, but they never start. They never take the first step. So I think taking the first step leads you to the next step. You know, then you can take a few other steps. That's what we did. So, as you said, I also, when I dropped out, I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do, but I knew that I wanted to be part of, you know, the entrepreneurial space. So I think it's finding the courage, firstly, to make the first step. Yeah. And I think second to that is, you know, informing yourself as much as you can, because a lot of the time, a lot of young guys don't pick up the book, you know, they don't attend certain seminars, whatever it is. So it's about learning as much as you can, you know what I mean? And I think you have to be really disciplined in terms of that, because as young guys, we like having fun, we like partying, we like doing all those things, but few people have it within them to, you know, sacrifice the good times to, you know, work on their dreams. And I think that's a very important aspect.
So it's about getting started and empowering yourself as you go along. So, Lungelo, you've got less than 10 seconds because Dumo's given us full motivation there. But a quick thing about what would you leave with entrepreneurs watching the show?
Don't be quick to quit.
Straight to the point. So there you have it. If you've been watching Young Money, we've been sitting down with the co-founders of AU Gold Vodka. It is available in stores in South Africa. One of the stores that comes to mind that has been mentioned is Macro. So go out and do get yourself a bottle. And of course, if you are an entrepreneur and you've been watching the show, the message is crystal clear. Don't be too quick to quit. And of course, always try to have the courage to get started. It's been a phenomenal story that we've picked up here in Centurion about how two young guys who decided that they're going to pursue yet another dream despite having multiple businesses that haven't taken off. And finally, it seems as if they've hit the sweet spot. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want us to come to you, it's really, really simple. All you need to do is just follow me on Twitter. It's @TheRealNozi or @CNBC Africa. Tell us about your business and don't forget to tag us. That's #YoungMoney410. Until next time, it's goodbye.